One, two, three. Three count four.
Hello, I am Be Better Gamer. Welcome to Be Better Gamer Wrestling. This channel is dedicated to wrestling video games. Fueled by my love, passion, and obsession for them, I am bringing you another WWF No Mercy Let's Play, where I am continuing my Women's Championship playthrough. Last episode, I played as Lita, WWF Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Famer Lita, and I am bringing you recently announced WWE Hall of Famer Ivory. She will be inducted in this year's Hall of Fame celebration. Very well deserved, in my opinion. I gotta be honest, as a kid, I know everyone, not as a kid, I was a teenager, but as a teenager, everyone loved Lita, everyone loved Trish, you know, people liked Sable. I loved Ivory. She was one of my favorites, one of my personal favorites, still to this day. There was just always something about her intensity, the way she looked, the way she moved in the ring. And much like Lita, much like a lot of the women in the Attitude Era division at the time, I think way ahead of her time in terms of, you know, being as part of that women's roster and what she was able to achieve. But I'll get into that. I'll get into how she was also part of something that was also way ahead of its time, Glow. I'll talk a bit about Glow in this episode, the actual TV show, and then the recent Netflix series sort of loosely based on that. I'll talk about, you know, Ivory and her accomplishments. Right now, what I'm doing in WWF No Mercy, as you saw, I changed the height and weight because for some reason the women in this game don't have their height and weight added to that. Don't know why the developers did that. Again, I think is something I talked about in the Lita episode. Women's wrestling at this time wasn't really seen as being such a groundbreaking thing, even though a lot of the women wrestlers in it, much like Ivory and Lita and Trish Stratus, were trying to break that preconceived notion that women should only be in wrestling to be, you know, eye candy. They should be sexual objects. They should be, you know, only feuding each other over men and, you know, being managers and stuff like that. And Ivory actually was brought into WWE. She debuted in WWE as a manager. And I didn't know at the time, actually, I didn't know until fairly recently when all the Glow buzz started happening. But Ivory got her foot into wrestling when she was part of the Glow TV show, which was done back in the 80s, and it ran for 4 seasons. And she wrestled under the name Tina Ferrari, which is kind of a cool name. You know, Tina Ferrari, I like that name. And she actually won the Glow Championship at one point. She was the Glow champion, and she didn't have interest of becoming a wrestler or getting involved in wrestling, but, you know, she's told this story before. She tells it in the documentary, and even quite recently she was on the Stone Cold podcast, and she explained that how she was sort of asked to go to this audition for this TV show for women's wrestling, and she was sort of dragged along from her friend. She didn't want to go. But when she got there, Mando Guerrero from the infamous, you know, legendary Guerrero family, he was the trainer put to the task to train all these non-wrestling women to be part of a wrestling show. And, you know, he was trying to teach them some stuff. And some of the women were kind of laughing and giggling, and he didn't think that they were taking it seriously. So he puts one of them in a sleeper hold, puts them asleep, and Ivory says she was hooked at that moment. Like, oh, that was so cool, because she saw how passionate he was. And, you know, a Dynamite Kid in his book has sort of a similar story about a trainer putting him to sleep to show how real and tough wrestling is. And a few other wrestlers have sort of told similar stories. So that seems to be the recurring theme. If you go to a wrestling school, or if you're being taught wrestling and you start laughing and giggling because it's funny, you're probably going to be put to sleep by the trainer. So that's what Mondo did. But Ivory was hooked, and from that moment, she was all in. You know, no pun intended with the upcoming All In, but she was all in with Glow, and the series was a success. It was a hit. A lot of people didn't expect it to be as big as it was, and we'll talk more about sort of the things I saw from, you know, doing research with Glow and watching the documentary. But, you know, if you haven't seen the Netflix show, If you haven't seen the 2012 documentary Glow, the story of the gorgeous ladies of wrestling, watch both of them. They're both excellent. I love the recent Netflix show with Allison Brie from Community and Mark Maron. He's a comedian. Also, a little interesting note, not many people might know this, but Christopher Diaz served as one of the writers of Glow. And if you're unfamiliar with the name, Christopher Diaz, he's a playwright. He's also done some work for TV, but he's a playwright, and he wrote a play that was nominated for the Pulitzer a few years back called The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deedy. And I bring that up because that play holds a special place in my heart. It's one of my favorite plays. It's a play about wrestling. Christopher Diaz is a big wrestling fan. He went to school to be a playwright, and he decided to merge his two favorite worlds, theater and wrestling, which is something I kind of want to do. And he wrote this amazing play. So go read it. The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deedy. I just thought I'd bring that up because he served as one of the writers for Glow, the TV series on Netflix. But go watch Glow too if you're a wrestling fan, because it's a fictional sort of retelling of the actual Glow show. You know, it's not completely based on the people and everyone that was involved in Glow, but it's basically making like a fictionalized account of what happened. And you know, it's combining certain characters in the show and certain women who they play. It's got a bunch of wrestler cameos in it. Kia Stevens, who was Awesome Kong and Karma and in TNA and WWE respectively, she plays a big part of the show. She's actually one of my favorite characters on the show. John Morrison's in there briefly. Tyrus, Carlito, Joey Ryan and his wife is in there. Alex Riley, his wife Laura James, if you're unfamiliar. Alex Riley, Brooke Hogan even has like a little cameo. Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian are in a match, and you know, they don't really have any names or anything, but they're just there in the background. It's really cool. And so go watch it. It's a great show. If you're a big fan of wrestling, obviously if you're watching this episode, go watch Glow. But the original Glow, it was very fascinating because I saw the TV show before I watched the Glow documentary about the original Glow and watched some of the episodes of the original Glow. And I gotta say, man, looking back now at Glow and what they were doing, it was kind of ahead of its time. And you know, I know this has sort of been said, I think, from people who were fans of the show, but it really was. It was pretty much the first women's promotion, even though it was made to be a TV show. But there was no other women's, organization around that it was just solely for women's wrestling. Women's wrestling was really just an attraction. You had people who were names in the scene of women's wrestling, like Wendy Richter, like, Fabulous Moolah, who would go around and travel, but there wasn't a promotion that they could come back to. They were always just sort of brought in as a feature. And I don't think they were taken seriously by a lot of the promoters and promotions who brought them in. They just brought them in as a draw. And there's a lot of stories about a lot of those women wrestlers coming up during that time where, a lot of the harassment they faced, a lot of the dark and seedy dealings they had with the promoters, and the lack of respect they got from people when they told that they were a wrestler, a women wrestler, and so it was really big in that sense to have this place for women's wrestling, even though the show itself is kind of like a sketch variety show mixed in with wrestling. But that's basically what Lucha Underground is today. Lucha Underground is like the gritty, more, intense version of what Glow was. Glow was very much this campy, over-the-top, cartoony wrestling show, which wasn't unlike of what WWE was trying to do in the late 80s, especially with their whole rock and wrestling connection. And I gotta believe, now that I've, been experiencing Glow and watching Glow, I gotta think that they were taking a lot of the stuff they were doing with the rock and wrestling connection and taking it from Glow, because Glow was kind of doing it better. WWE, all they really had was like Cyndi Lauper coming in for a little bit with Wendy Richter and the whole Moolah thing. But Glow, you had all these women, all these cool characters, and the characters, yeah, they were silly and campy, and some of them, offensive, much like most, wrestling in the 80s. But there was some genuineness to characters being portrayed. And I think a lot of that has to do with, from watching the documentary and reading about it, the director and the creators and the writers, they definitely tried to highlight the best part of the women that they had and make the characters reflect more so the personalities of the women they had, because they knew they didn't have trained wrestlers, with the exception of a few. And so they had to make best with what they had, but by highlighting the positive and sort of like hiding the negatives, it made for a really good show. And they did a lot of crazy things on the show that kind of pushed the envelope in a way. And I think because maybe a lot of people weren't taking too much notice, like it was definitely becoming popular, but it wasn't becoming like this super mainstream hit. They had a lot more creative freedom with what they could do. And in turn, by doing that, I think it created a much more interesting and fascinating wrestling show. It would be nice to see WWE or maybe some other, well, actually, no, it would have to be on WWE because they probably are the only ones who have the money to do it. To do a show centered around just the women's division, I think it would be great. I think wrestling in general, I'm a big believer that like the stuff that Lucha Underground does with how they film their vignettes and scenes like that, and what Matt Hardy did with his Woken gimmick, his broken Matt Hardy gimmick a couple of years ago, and now that they're doing again in WWE, I think that's sort of the direction I would like to see WWE going, and sort of blending the action in the ring with some stuff that's filmed outside of the ring to sort of build this fantastical world of wrestling, and sort of move away from the wrestling world that we know exists now, where we know these are people who are wrestlers and they're playing a gimmick or whatever, and it's kind of sort of based on who they are as a person, but not really, but more so like like actually creating full-blown characters that only exist in this world, separating the person playing the wrestler and the character, much like how you would an actor on a TV show. And that's something that Glow talks about a lot too, and that's another reason why I like Glow. But I don't want to talk too much about Glow. I did want to talk about it because Ivory was definitely the biggest thing to come out of Glow. In terms of the wrestling world. She would go on to the WWE. She became a 3-time women's champion, and definitely earning her claim to fame in the Hall of Fame. But she came at a time in 1999 where the female division was very thin, if you would even call it a division. You had Miss Jackie, you had Luna Vachon, who was around for a little bit, but really the women at that time in WWE were being seen as eye candy. They were the sexual objects. You had Sable, you had Deborah, you had Sunny, right before Ivory came in, Miss Kitty, and even Fabulous Moolah was there, but she obviously was way past her prime and sort of seen as like comedic relief every time she would step into the ring. So, it's interesting to see that Ivory became so passionate about wrestling sort of by happenstance, and trying to go find a bigger outlet to do it, and she finds her way in WWE. But it wouldn't be until maybe a year or two where things start picking up, where she could actually showcase her ability and her passion for being a women's wrestler. And I think a lot of that started when Lita started becoming a big deal, and Trish started wrestling more. Ivory's first championship victory came from defeating Lita and being a part of a feud with Lita, and they had a little bit of back and forth there. But I think it's really when Ivory joined Right to Censor that things really start to pick up for her. And Right to Censor is funny because they're featured in WWF No Mercy. Stevie Richards replaces Big Show in the championship mode, so you always have to constantly hear the Right to Censor music. But I was never a fan of Right to Censor. I mean, I just thought the music was really annoying, but it wasn't just the music. I was never a fan of the group because I could never take them seriously. They were very much the stereotypical, annoying heels, very easy heat, where it's like, we believe in censorship, so we're gonna, come out here and just tell someone they shouldn't be doing something, and that can only go so far. Val Venus, Godfather, Stevie Richards. Stevie Richards was probably my favorite of the group of the men, but I just never could take them seriously because I felt like at that time, not only were they thrust into this tag team division that had, the Hardys, Edge and Christian and the Dudleys, but to try to take any one of them and put them in a singles role, I also forgot Bull Buchanan, wouldn't really work because I felt like none of them really fit in with a lot of the upper card and main event guys. But when Ivory joined, that's when I started noticing them more because, it was the first time since maybe China being part of DX, which wasn't really too far removed in years-wise from the formation of DX and Right to Censor, but in wrestling years, it felt like forever. It was the first time since we really had a prominent female wrestler be part of like an actual stable. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Lita was with the Hardys, but it was just them. It was just them three. Trish, she managed TNA, but again, she was seen as like sort of this hybrid manager / wrestler, whereas Ivory was brought in part of an already existing group of 4 guys. They didn't need to add in a 5th person, and when they did, it was Ivory. And unlike how the men were still kind of sort of relegated to like mid-card status, Ivory, I think that accelerated her to being at the top of the women's division for that time because it made her the top heel. There weren't really a lot of top female heels. Trish was technically a heel, but she was only really a heel because like she was like the stereotypical quote unquote diva. So she had this like cocky, arrogant air to her, and she sort of aligned herself with the McMahon Helmsleys, whereas Ivory, she was a heel with a purpose. And even though it was sort of like cheap heat in terms of like the censorship, it actually made more sense to be found in the women's division, to have this woman who was wearing the full body outfit, who's wearing the full white dress shirt and the black pants, and to say that all the other women who go around parading themselves in skimpy outfits, they're the enemy, they're the bad, and all the people who cheering are part of the problem. It's very reminiscent of like CM Punk when he was like doing the straight edge thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's just like people hate it when you tell them how to live their life. And I think especially to take it from a female perspective, when she started feuding with China, which is I thought was one of the most interesting things about Ivory's WWE Hall of Fame video package, was that they very clearly mentioned China and her feud with China. The whole feud revolved around Ivory disapproving of China posing for Playboy. And it's ironic that many years later we would have the discussion about China being in the Hall of Fame, and Triple H making his comments that it's gonna be hard because of like the choices she made after wrestling, i.e. she did porn, was gonna be hard to bring in because of that. Even though here we are back in at the height of China's popularity and the height of WWE's popularity, they're very clearly having this joint partnership with Playboy, not just with China, but with Sable before her, Tori Wilson later on, and a few other women that would come into the company. They had no problem then. And yeah, posing nude and porn are 2 different things, but honestly, they're both sort of going towards the same goal of what of the demographic they're trying to reach. And it's China's feud with Ivory was really more so about female empowerment. That was her body, her choice to pose for Playboy because she's proud of what she looks like. And China specifically, I think one of the big things for her being in Playboy, it's something that we see recently, like in the past few years with Sports Illustrated doing their body issue, sort of breaking down these expectations and perceptions of what beauty is. I remember when China first came out, and a lot of my friends would make jokes like, oh, she looks like a man, this and that. And she did have surgery done. She did do some work, much like a lot of people in show business do in wrestling and in entertainment. But, for her to pose nude in Playboy, I think was a big deal because she did not look like anyone else, any other Playboy models. You know what I mean? So the feud worked because of that, because, it touched up on a lot of things that I think obviously WWE kind of missed the boat on when they were doing the feud. But it was another thing that was ahead of its time, and that's something that I just keep thinking about with Ivory. I just always thought she was kind of ahead of her time. She was kind of ahead of her time as being a top female heel. She was ahead of her time as being part of this women's wrestling promotion, and she was ahead of her time as sort of being this anchor to a women's division that was sort of growing. And I think that's why she's getting inducted, because Lita was a pioneer in the sort of moves that she would do. Trish was a pioneer in sort of like coming in from being this fitness model to being this great wrestler and having this legacy. But Ivory was an anchor there for it, and really looking back, again, this is going sort of what I talked about with my Lita episode, Ivory even said it in her Stone Cold podcast. She would come to the tapings, she would come to the shows a lot. She didn't know what she was going to be doing. She didn't know what was going to be planned, if they were going to use her that day or not. And it's unfortunate, you think of someone like her now, how they would probably thrive in the environment that WWE is trying to create. But it was a lot of, I think, wasted potential. But I'm glad that Ivory got to have her few moments that are still memorable, and she did have a WrestleMania match with Chyna. That was a big blow off, but the match with Chyna was basically like a squash match. Chyna destroyed her in like a minute or two, and again, it was just that kind of thing. I think WWE, they like to look back on everything with sort of these like rose colored glasses, but these women were shining because it was the only way that they were going to get noticed, was by putting themselves out there and doing something unexpected. And we look back on it now, we cheer it now, we call them pioneers now. But it's tough to go back and watch and know that they were struggling so much and they were fighting so much to get seen, to get noticed. Because honestly, like I said, when Ivory showed up and I saw Ivory and I saw her wrestle, I was totally all about it. She was instantly one of my favorites. It wouldn't be until Victoria would show up and kind of replace her as my number one favorite. But I was all about everything that she would do in the ring, and I would want to see her talk more. I would want to see her cut promos more. I would want to see her wrestle more. And I'm happy now that WWE is finally getting to that point with women's wrestling, that we're starting to see a lot of the women's wrestlers come about. But again, in Japan, the late 80s, early 90s, they were all about women's wrestling with all the different wrestling promotions. And you got to look at the success of Glow, and that really there was only a few people who wanted to make that show and get it done. But all the women were totally involved and invested with it and wanted to make the best show they possibly could. It's a shame that it was canceled. It was basically canceled because the executive producer, he was like the big owner of the casino they were working in and filming out of, and his wife caught him having an affair or two with some of the women, and she threatened him to pull the plug, or I guess maybe she would divorce him and take all his money. I don't know, but he basically pulled the plug because he really wasn't entirely invested in it, I think, like how the main producer was. And after that, it was just hard to get another show like it done. And even to this day, again, there's not really hasn't been a show like it. I think if anyone has the ability to do it now, it would be WWE. But Ring of Honor, they've been trying to push their Women of Honor. Obviously, the TNA, they have the Knockouts division, or Impact Wrestling, they have the Knockouts division, and they're trying to improve that division now even more with new leadership. And I would say even the Knockouts division was a better alternative for many years to what WWE was doing. But WWE, we got 205 Live, we have NXT, they did the whole Facebook show with the Mixed Match Challenge. If they can do Total Divas, they can definitely do an hour's show for the women. Maybe do it in Full Sail, maybe do it after a taping or something. Find the time. It definitely could be done because they have so many great female athletes now. And the one thing that I am always wary of is that they'll fall into old habits where you know, they have so many women, but they're only gonna give them so few moments on, you know, Raw or SmackDown. And when you look back and you look at like the women like Ivory, you know, it's like you don't want to miss up on another Ivory, because I think she was great. I think she was special. I think she was way ahead of her time, and I think that's worth celebrating. So long story short, I'm glad she's in the WWE Hall of Fame. I was excited to delve into the world of Glow, to do research for this episode. And yeah, if you haven't watched Glow, watch Glow. Highly recommended. Watch the documentary. Watch some of the original show. Check out some of Ivory's great matches. It's all on the WWE Network. And yeah, until next time, the next episode is going to be big. I'm going to be talking about China again. I'm so excited to be talking about China. I talked about a little bit here, but next episode will be all about China. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like. You know what to do. You've been on YouTube before. I'm Be Better Gamer. Until next time, keep watching all the wrestling.